In the 1981 James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, Roger Moore's Bond and Bond girl Melina Havelock, played by Carol Bouquet, dive to the bottom of the Ionian Sea to recover a top-secret code machine from the wreck of a sunken British spy ship. There, they are suddenly attacked by one of the villain's goons wearing what looks like a nightmarish combination of a medieval suit of armor and a giant insect exoskeleton with a bulbous helmet, multiple round portholes, segmented limbs, and menacing mechanical claws. A similar suit shows up in the 1989 underwater monster movie Deep Star 6. But while this contraption may look like it came from the fevered imagination of a Hollywood production designer, it is in fact a real piece of deep diving equipment known as the Atmospheric Diving Suit, or ADS. Effectively wearable, articulated personal submarines, ADSs alleviate many of the limitations of traditional diving techniques, allowing humans to work at previously unheard of depths. But achieving this capability has come at the cost of daunting engineering challenges, with the surprisingly long history of atmospheric diving suits being one of ingenuity, dogged trial and error, and incremental improvements in technology. This is the fascinating story of mankind's quest to conquer the deep in a suit of armor. Alright, so you finally got that great idea, but where does it live? A blog, an online shop, or maybe just a space? Or maybe it's just a space to tell the world about what you do? Well, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform that makes all of that possible, and then some. Whether you're just getting started or whether you're scaling up, Squarespace has the tools to create a site that's not only beautiful, but also super functional. From product sales to content sharing, it's all in one place. But let's be honest, it's pretty crowded, but with Squarespace's design intelligence, creating a unique digital presence becomes a whole lot easier. This feature taps into over 2 decades of design expertise and cutting-edge AI to help you craft a website that's perfectly tailored to you. You don't have to be a web design wizard, you just need your vision, and design intelligence handles the rest. And if you're selling products, let's talk about payments. No more fussing about with separate systems for payments. This feature keeps everything streamlined, letting you accept payments from day one. Plus, you can offer all sorts of options from Apple Pay to Afterpay, making things easy for you and your customers. And another thing, Acuity scheduling. Have you ever tried organizing bookings with a spreadsheet? It is a massive headache, but Acuity lets you handle client appointments straight from your website, complete with payment processing, reminders, and a sleek, user-friendly booking system. So whether you're a life coach, a consultant, or a personal trainer, keeping things organized has never been simpler. Ready to make it all happen? Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/brainfood to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain with the code BRAINFOOD. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring, and now back to today's episode. Up to 11 kilometers deep, pitch dark, and teeming with sharks, stinging jellyfish, giant squid, and countless other horrors yet to be discovered, the ocean is a forbidding place where humans were not meant to venture. But humans being humans, of course, we venture anyway. Yet, the greatest danger in the ocean is not the creatures which lurk in its depths, but the ocean itself, that is, the water, whose crushing pressure increases at a rate of 1 atmosphere, that's 101.3 kilopascals, or 14.7 pounds per square inch, every 10 meters or 33 feet. At just 1 meter in depth, simple snorkeling becomes impossible due to the pressure preventing the lungs from expanding and the diver inhaling. To go deeper, divers must breathe compressed gas using a diving suit or self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, aka scuba. But this brings with it many dangers. For example, divers wearing old standard diving dress with copper helmet sometimes encountered a gruesome phenomenon called the squeeze. This occurred when the hose or pump supplying air to the suit leaked or failed, causing the water pressure to crush the unfortunate diver and squeeze their fleshy remains up into the helmet and the air hose. Breathing compressed air, scuba divers can safely descend to around 40 meters or 130 feet, the typical limit for recreational diving. But if they linger for more than a few minutes, they run the risk of developing decompression sickness, aka the bends. This occurs when nitrogen from the diver's breathing gas becomes dissolved in their tissues and they ascend too quickly, causing the nitrogen to come out of solution and form tiny bubbles that can cause all sorts of symptoms, ranging from an itchy rash to joint pain to deadly embolisms in the bloodstream. To prevent this, divers must descend slowly, making frequent decompression stops or make use of a decompression chamber on the surface. Unfortunately, this problem cannot be eliminated simply by breathing pure oxygen, for at pressures encountered below 6 meters or 10 feet, oxygen becomes toxic, causing damage to the lungs, nervous system, and eyes. Below 40 meters or 130 feet lies the realm of technical diving. Not only is the risk of decompression sickness even greater here, but divers also face the danger of nitrogen narcosis, or rapture of the deep, an alcohol-like intoxication that can result in dangerous lapses in judgment. To counter this, technical divers use special gas mixtures called heliox or trimix, in which part or all of the nitrogen is replaced by helium. But this comes with its own challenges, for not only does breathing helium rapidly wick away a diver's body heat, potentially leading into hypothermia and alter their voice, making communication difficult, but below 100 meters or 330 feet, it can inflict neurological disturbances known as high-pressure nervous syndrome, or HPNS, aka helium tremors, characterized by muscle spasms, extreme drowsiness, dizziness, and cognitive impairment. To avoid this, divers operating at extreme depths below 130 meters sometimes use exotic breathing gas mixtures such as hydroleox, hydrox, or neox containing hydrogen or neon in place of nitrogen or helium. For reasons of cost, most commercial divers working at depths of up to 100 meters use regular nitrox or trimix breathing gas. However, at these depths, the time required to safely decompress after each dive rapidly increases to the point of it being unreasonable and uneconomical. For this reason, for longer jobs like those encountered in the offshore oil industry, divers use a specialized technique called saturation diving. This is based on the fact that after around 72 hours at a certain depth, a diver's body becomes completely saturated with nitrogen and won't absorb any more. Thus, no matter how much longer they remain at that pressure, it will take the same amount of time to decompress. Saturation divers spend their shifts living in a specialized diving habitat mounted on the deck of an oil rig or support ship, maintained at the equivalent pressure of their working depth, and are ferried back and forth from the worksite using a pressurized diving bell or personnel transfer capsule. The typical formula for decompression is 1 day per 100 feet of depth plus a day for safety, meaning a shift at 100 meters or 328 feet would take around 5 days to decompress from. However, by allowing divers to decompress only once per shift, saturation diving significantly reduces the risk of decompression sickness. But the technique is not without its dangers, as 5 divers discovered in 1983 when a diving habitat aboard the Norwegian offshore oil rig accidentally suffered a horrific explosive decompression, as we've covered in our video, the most gruesome death imaginable, the Byford dolphin accident. One potential yet exotic solution to these problems is for divers to breathe oxygenated liquid like perfluorocarbon, which would address many of the most common diving challenges, including decompression and HPNS. However, as covered in our previous video, Can Humans Breathe Liquid Like in the Abyss, this technology is not yet mature enough for practical use. A more obvious and practical solution to use is simply submersibles, or better yet, remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, which further reduce the risks for their operators. But for many jobs like offshore oil work, there's no substitute for having a human being on site working directly with their own hands. And this is where atmospheric diving suits come in. Effectively one-person wearable submersibles, ADSs allow their operators to work at depths of up to 700 meters or 2,300 feet while maintaining an internal atmosphere at regular surface pressure, eliminating the need for decompression or exotic breathing gas mixtures. A pure oxygen atmosphere can also be supplied without the danger of toxicity, allowing for more efficient breathing and storage. But achieving this capability presents unique design challenges, namely that the suit, especially the limbs, must be light and flexible enough to grant the operator useful dexterity without excessive exertion, while simultaneously being sufficiently strong and well sealed to resist the enormous water pressure at great depths. Over the past 300 years, inventors have come up with a variety of ingenious solutions to these difficult technical problems. The first rigid diving suit, or diving engine, was invented in 1715 by English inventor John Lethbridge, who described his creation as, quote, made of wainscot perfectly round, about 6 feet in length, about 2.5 feet diameter at the head, and about 18 inches diameter at the foot, and contains about 30 gallons. It is hooped with iron hoops without and within to guard against pressure. There are 2 holes for the arms, and a glass about 4 inches diameter and 1.25 inches thick to look through, which is fixed in the bottom part so as to be in a direct line with the eye, 2 air holes upon the upper part, into one of which air is conveyed by a pair of bellows, both which are stopped with plugs immediately before going down to the bottom. At the foot part, there's a hole to let out water. Sometimes there's a large rope fixed to the back or upper part, by which it's let down, and there's a little line called the signal line, by which the people above are directed to what to do, and under is fixed a piece of timber as a guard for the glass. I go in with my feet foremost, and when my arms are got through the holes, then the head is put on, which is fastened with screws. It requires 500 weight to sink it, and take but 15-pound weight from it, and it will buoy upon the surface of the water. I lie straight upon my breast all the time I am in the engine, which hath many times been more than 6 hours, being frequently refreshed upon the surface by a pair of bellows. I can move at about 12 foot square at the bottom. where I have stayed many times, 34 minutes. I have been 10 fathoms deep many 100 times, and have been 12 fathom, but with great difficulty. In April 1721, Lethbridge used his diving engine to salvage a large quantity of silver from the wreck of the British East India Company's ship Vansittart, which sank in a storm on March 2, 1719, off the Cape Verde Islands. He was assisted in this salvage by fellow inventor Jacob Rau, who designed a similar suit made of copper. This was among the earliest successful uses of a diving suit in recorded history, and the first of many such salvage operations that would soon make Lethbridge a wealthy man. But the diving engine was not an atmospheric diving suit, for it had to be supplied with compressed air to prevent water leaking through the operator's sleeves. The diver could thus still suffer from the bends if they remained at great depth for too long. The main challenge in creating a practical atmospheric diving suit is designing limb joints that remain flexible yet watertight regardless of external water pressure. When the joint of a regular flexible diving suit is flexed, its volume decreases, increasing its internal pressure and making it increasingly difficult to move. This is the same problem that plagues designers of spacesuits, only in reverse. In 1838, English inventor William H. Taylor came up with a clever solution to this problem: accordion, or bellows-like convolute joints made of leather, which maintained a near constant internal volume when flexed. The rest of Taylor's suit was made of iron, like a medieval suit of armor, and featured a ballast tank system to allow its buoyancy to be adjusted. But while patented, the suit was never built and would likely not have worked as intended. Not only would its great weight and bulk have rendered the operator immobile, but the air supply system required the interior pressure to match the exterior water pressure, making it a regular rather than an atmospheric diving suit. Nonetheless, Taylor's convoluted joints were ahead of their time, as this design is still used in modern spacesuits. Far more advanced was inventor Lodner D. Phillips's ADS design from 1856, which featured a barrel-shaped torso accessed through a hatch in the top and limbs articulated at the shoulders, elbows, hips, and knees. Instead of convoluted joints, the limbs used rotating ball and socket joints with leather seals to keep out water. A round portal allowed the operator to see outside, while simple mechanical pincers allowed objects to be manipulated. The suit was supplied with air by a hose from the surface, could be propelled by a hand-cranked propeller, and featured a ballast tank system and a pair of inflatable lift bags or balloons for adjusting buoyancy. But while Phillips' designs were very similar to suits used by the US Navy 60 years later, there is no evidence that it was ever built or tested. In 1881, another American inventor, Stephen P.M. Tasker, patented an all-metal suit with articulated convolute joints like William Taylor's, which was designed to be covered over by a regular waterproof diving suit. While at first glance such a system would eliminate the need to design joints that were both flexible and waterproof, in practice it would have failed very quickly, with the flexible suit being forced by the water pressure into any weak points in the metal joints and tearing said joints apart. Thankfully, Tasker's suit was never built. The first fully articulated anthropomorphic ADS was designed in 1882 by two brothers, Alphonse and Theodore Carmagolle of Marseille, France. Weighing 380 kilograms, like the Phillips suit, Carmagolle's design used concentric spherical joints sealed by oiled cloth. Only instead of 4, it used 22, 4 in each leg, 6 in each arm, and 2 in the body, allowing for a full range of motion. To allow all-around vision, the spherical helmet was fitted with 25 2-inch diameter glass portals, and if this design seems familiar, that's because the Carmagnole suit served as the inspiration for the Big Daddies in the hit 2007 video game BioShock. Yet despite its advanced features, the Carmagnole suit suffered from leaky joints and never went into service. Over the next 40 years, various inventors came up with incremental improvements to ADS design. For example, in 1894, Australian inventors John Buchanan and Alexander Gordon came up with a design composed of spiral wires wound around a flexible waterproof cloth which remained flexible and watertight even at high pressure. Hinged radius rods were later added along the legs and arms to prevent them from collapsing under pressure. A prototype of the suit was built by British diving equipment manufacturer Sieb, Gorman & Company in 1898 and tested off the Scottish coast with promising results. In 1904, Italian inventor Giuseppe Restucci patented a novel design in which the suit's joints were continuously supplied with compressed air, preventing water from entering while allowing the interior of the suit to be maintained at regular atmospheric pressure. In 1914, American inventor Chester E. McDuffie created the first suit with rolling ball-bearing joints to further increase flexibility. This suit, which resembled nothing so much as a 1950s sci-fi movie robot, was also unique in being made of aluminium alloy, making it much easier to walk around in and in deliberately not being designed to be completely waterproof. Instead, a small pump driven by compressed air removed any water that leaked in through the joints. This design was further improved in 1915 by Harry L. Bowdoin, who added a small duct to allow seawater to flow into the joints to equalize the pressure. However, without lubrication, these joints would have worn down very quickly. In 1922, Victor Campos developed a ball-bearing joint filled with oil, which accomplished both tasks at the same time. In 1917, Michigan inventor Benjamin F. Leavitt designed and built his own ADS, which, unlike most previous designs, was fully self-contained and needed no surface umbilical, featuring an internal oxygen tank and carbon dioxide scrubber system that allowed the operator to remain underwater for up to an hour. It was also built of manganese bronze, which was cheaper than aluminium but resisted saltwater corrosion better than iron or steel. Leavitt used his suit to dive on numerous shipwrecks, including the steam freighter SS Puabic in Lake Huron and the schooner Cape Horn off the coast of Chile, salvaging hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of copper ore. SS Puabic, which sank in 1865, had previously been dived on in 1891 by inventor Oliver Pelkey, whose ADS design used a flexible envelope reinforced against water pressure by metal rings. However, on his second dive, the suit became tangled in debris and imploded, killing Pelkey instantly. However, the first practical, commercially produced ADS was produced by the German company Neufeld und Kuchner, starting in 1913. Designed by German inventor Friedrich Gall, the suit closely resembled Lodner Phillips's 1856 design, with a rigid barrel-shaped torso with 4 round viewports and articulated legs and arms. Early versions had a 2-piece torso, jointed by a bolted flange, but later versions had a 1-piece torso entered through a hatch at the top. Initially, the limbs were articulated at the shoulder, elbow, wrist, waist, knee, and ankle, but due to excessive leakage, this was reduced to the bare minimum of shoulder, wrist, and waist. For similar reasons, the initial articulated gloves were replaced by simple lobster claw manipulators. The joints themselves were of the ball and socket type with rubber seals, which under increased pressure would compress and seal more tightly. However, this had the unfortunate side effect of also making the joints harder to move, limiting the depth to which the suit could be used. Being largely self-contained, the suit's breathing gas was provided by a separate rebreather system worn by the operator. However, the suit was largely designed to be operated while suspended from a ship by a cable and featured an umbilical cable to supply telephone communications and electrical power for lights. In case of an emergency, the operator could detach the suit from the cable and use the internal ballast tank system to rise to the surface independently. In 1924, German diver Otto Kraft set a world diving record by descending to a depth of 75 meters or 230 feet in a Neufeld and Kuchner suit while searching for the wreck of the British submarine HMS M1, which on November 12, 1925 was accidentally rammed by the Swedish ship SS Vidar and sank in the English Channel with all hands lost. However, the most famous use of the Neufeld and Kuchner suit was in the salvage of the British Peninsular and Oriental, or S&O Company, ocean liner SS Egypt, which on May 20, 1922 was accidentally rammed and sunk by the French ship Seine off the southern coast of Ireland. While 252 of Egypt's 338 passengers and crew were rescued, some £1 million, more than £200 million today of gold and silver bullion, went down in a strongroom. S&O hired the Italian salvage firm Società Recupero Marittimo, or SREMA, headed by chief diver Alberto Gianni, which in 1930 located the wreck at a depth of 128 meters or 420 feet, out of reach of most contemporary diving techniques. However, Gianni knew of the Neufeld and Kuchner armored suit and acquired an example. Unfortunately, the extreme depth rendered the suit effectively immobile, so it was used instead as a manned observation chamber to direct the placement of explosives and grabbing claws to blow open and retrieve the ship's strongroom. Later, a simpler diving bell called the Turretta Budiscopia was used for this purpose. The salvage operation, which lasted until 1935, was highly successful, succeeding in recovering 98% of the Egypt's bullion cargo. Though limited in operating depth and deemed to be fail-safe, the Neufeld and Kuchner suits were used until the end of the Second World War by the German Kriegsmarine, which dubbed them Panzertascher, or armored divers. The last of the first-generation ADSs worth mentioning is also among the most unusual, the Wiley Bell, created in the early 1930s by American inventors Carl and Albert Wiley. With a bulbous body topped by a helmet-like observation dome covered in viewports, the Wiley Bell had no articulations like a regular ADS and was largely designed to be operated while suspended from a ship by a cable like a diving bell. Yet it also had a set of 3 wheels turned by a hand crank, allowing it to be driven over a suitably hard and flat seafloor, as well as a mechanical arm that could be operated from inside the vessel to dig or grab objects. The contraption thus blurred the line between an ADS, a diving bell, and a one-man submarine. The Wiley Bell was most famously used in the salvage of the SS Islander, a steamship of the Canadian Pacific Navigation Company, which on August 19, 1901, struck a submerged rock and sank in the Stevens Passage near Juneau, Alaska, laden with a large quantity of gold dust from the Klondike Gold Rush. Due to the depth of the water, some 100 meters or 300 feet, the wreck of the Islander was not located until 1921 and salvage not begun until 1929. With the help of two Wiley Bells operating from the salvage ship Grifson, cables were passed between two barges under the hull of the Islander and several tidal cables used to lift the wreck onto the beach so a cargo of gold could be recovered. But while all of these early suits represented an important technological advancement, none succeeded in fulfilling the full potential of the ADS concept. That breakthrough would finally be achieved in 1930 by British engineer Joseph Salim Perez. Growing up in the Middle East, Perez first began pondering the challenges of deep-sea diving while observing pearl divers working in the Persian Gulf. In 1918, he was hired by the engineering firm W.G. Tarrant in Byfleet in Surrey, where he was given the resources to develop a working ADS. He succeeded in solving the problem of limb mobility by designing a special spherical joint filled with oil, which, being incompressible and easily displaceable, allowed the suit's limbs to move freely at depths of up to 180 meters or 600 feet. In 1923, Perez was asked to participate in the salvage of the SS Egypt, but he declined, explaining that his prototype, machined from solid steel, was still too heavy to be practical. By 1929, however, he had solved the problem by constructing his suit from cast magnesium, only 1/5 as dense as steel. In 1929, he revealed his perfected creation, dubbed Tritonia, which, like earlier models, featured a rigid, barrel-shaped torso covered in portholes for visibility. However, the arms and legs articulated in 3 places and were far lighter and more flexible than anything that had come before. In September of that year, Perez's assistant, Jim Jarrett, dove to a depth of 123 meters or 404 feet in Loch Ness, noting that the suit's joints remained perfectly flexible throughout. No word on whether he spotted any monsters. His design vindicated, Perez offered Tritonia to the Royal Navy, but while the suit passed Navy evaluations with flying colors, it was ultimately rejected on the grounds that Navy divers had no need to descend below 90 meters or 300 feet. Over the following decade, Jarrett made a number of deep dives in Tritonia, including the wreck of the Cunard liner RMS Lusitania, infamously sunk by a German submarine on May 7, 1915, but due to lack of interest, the suit was retired in 1937. After this, Joseph Perez left the diving industry to pursue advancements in plastic molding and gas turbine technology. For the next 3 decades, little development was done on atmospheric diving suits, but in the 1960s, the petroleum industry began pushing farther and farther offshore into deeper and deeper waters in search of oil and gas, pushing diving technology to its limits. While saturation diving, first developed by the US Navy through its Sea Lab program, was one solution to the problem of working at great depths, as we have seen, this technique has its share of limitations and dangers. The ADS's time, it seemed, had finally come. In 1969, engineers Mike Humphrey and Mike Morrow of the English firm Underwater Marine Engineering recognized the potential usefulness of ADS suits to the offshore oil industry and sought to create a more modern and capable version. They thus sought out the old master himself, Joseph Perez, and his creation, Tritonia, which was located in a Glasgow warehouse and shipped to UME's headquarters in Hampshire. While this shipment was meant to be a secret, the crate reportedly arrived with the words Lusitania diving suit emblazoned in large block letters on the side, so whoops-a-daisy there. Amazingly, Tritonia was in excellent condition and required only minor modifications before Perez himself, then in his early 70s, demonstrated the suit in the company's testing tank. When interest from the oil and gas industry failed to materialize, UME obtained a research grant from the British government and formed a new enterprise called Denison, Hibbard and Borrow, or DHB Construction, to build their new ADS. Working off Perez's original concepts, UME used modern manufacturing techniques to create an even lighter and more flexible design dubbed the Jim suit, after Perez's old assistant, Jim Jarrett. Like Tritonia, Jim was largely constructed from magnesium alloys, which had a high strength-to-weight ratio. The first suits weighed around 500 kilograms, had 8 flexible joints at the shoulders, elbows, hips, and knees, and a communications umbilical and ballast weights that could be jettisoned in an emergency. The first Jim suit was completed in November 1971, with field tests commencing early the next year aboard the Royal Navy salvage vessel HMS Reclaim. 2 dives were conducted down to 120 meters or 400 feet, the depth being limited not by the suit itself, but by the conventional divers providing support. However, in 1974, the suit was successfully tested to a simulated depth of 300 meters or 1,000 feet in a surface pressure chamber. Yet, despite the suit's impressive performance, the offshore oil industry still expressed little interest. It wasn't until 1975, when the Houston-based firm Oceaneering International purchased DHB Construction, that Jim suits began being used on American offshore oil rigs. This annoyed the British government, who, having invested funds in the project, were eager to see the suit used by British companies. Nonetheless, the Gilles suit made its first commercial dives in 1976 on Pan-Arctic's Hecla M25 oil rig, with oceaneering diver Walt Thompson being lowered through a hole in a 5-meter thick ice floe. On his first dive, Thompson broke the world record for the longest dive below 149 meters, working at a depth of 275 meters for 6 hours. And while the average water temperature was just below 0 degrees Celsius, he was able to stay warm by simply wearing a thick sweater. By contrast, saturation divers operating in such conditions must wear special dry suits heated with warm water supplied by an umbilical line. At the start of the offshore oil boom, extraction companies were making so much money that the high cost of saturation diving was not an issue. But as the market shrank in the late 1970s and early 1980s, these companies finally began showing interest in the lower operating cost of ADS systems. Gilles suits thus began being used on dozens of commercial dives, and by 1981 there were 19 units in use around the world. The Gilles suit quickly became the most recognizable ADS in the world, being featured in films such as For Your Eyes Only and Deep Star 6. Yet despite the Gilles suit's success, there was still considerable room for improvement, and oceaneering soon developed a more advanced version, the Jam suit, constructed of lighter fiberglass and aluminium alloys. The original magnesium dome with 4 portholes was also replaced with a single-piece acrylic dome for greater visibility, and the 2 joint arms and legs with accordion-like limbs featuring multiple segmented joints offering much greater flexibility and range of motion. This improved suit was rated to a depth of up to 600 meters or 2,000 feet. Many of the Jam suit's features were integrated into oceaneering's WASP, introduced in 1978. Designed for mid-water work, WASP had a solid lower body in place of articulated legs and a system of electric thrusters to allow the operator to maneuver. In 2000, a WASP operator set a world diving record by repairing a gas pipeline at a depth of 652 meters, or 2,150 feet in the Gulf of Mexico. Holy sh**, that's so deep! Since the 1970s, numerous advanced ADS designs have been developed, including the Newt suit, a highly anthropomorphic aluminium suit created in 1987 by Canadian inventor Phil Nyatten and currently manufactured by Oceanworks as the Hard suit. Nyatten also developed the more advanced exosuit in the early 2000s, while in 1997 Oceanworks developed the ADS 2000 for use by the US Navy. Made operational in 2006, the ADS 2000 is among the most advanced atmospheric diving suits in the world, capable of diving down to 600 meters or 2,000 feet for up to 6 hours and maneuvering in midwater using integrated electric thrusters. Yet, despite all these technological advances, engineers still haven't quite figured out how to give ADSs the manual dexterity of regular diving suits, with nearly all current models featuring the same mechanical lobster claw actuators as suits from a century ago. Over the last 25 years, atmospheric diving suits have suffered only one fatal accident, an incident in August 1999 when a bolt failure caused an oceaneering WASP suit to plunge 25 meters into the side of its launch platform, mortally injuring its pilot. This extremely low accident rate, along with the elimination of such classic diving risks such as decompression sickness, nitrogen narcosis, and HPNS, makes ADSs the safest deep-water diving system in the world. However, like all technologies, ADSs have their drawbacks, costing nearly $1 million to manufacture, requiring specialized and expensive support equipment, and being less flexible than conventional saturation divers. But until we figure out how to breathe liquid or evolve gills, atmospheric diving suits remain the closest available means for humans to work freely and safely in the ocean depths, whether to extract oil, explore and salvage shipwrecks, perform scientific research, or if necessary, fight off giant sea monsters.